Welcome to Whispers of Time. Tonight we're going to explore something that most people never think about. How did human beings communicate when there were no words? When language, that thing we consider the ultimate marker of our humanity, did not exist? The answer is beautiful, deeply moving, and profoundly relevant to who you are right now, at this moment, seeking rest and meaning in the quiet of your own night. The timeline we're about to traverse spans millions of years. Let me paint this context for you so you understand the scale of what we're discussing. Our species, Homo sapiens, emerged approximately 300,000 years ago in Africa, though some recent evidence suggests it may have been earlier or involved a more gradual process than previously thought. But our story of communication begins long before that. It stretches back further than most people comprehend, back to a time when our ancestors were not fully human at all, yet were becoming something remarkable, something unprecedented on Earth. For most of human existence, and I want you to sit with this number, for almost the entirety of the 300,000 years that Homo sapiens has existed, there were no written words. There was no hello carved into clay, no love letters preserved on parchment, no grocery lists, no stories inscribed into stones to last forever in the way we think of history. And even before that, for millions of years before modern humans existed, there were no spoken languages in the way we understand them today. Yet, people thrived. They hunted together with precision and strategy. They raised their young with tenderness and care. They created art that still moves us to tears. They mourned the dead with rituals that speak to something eternal in the human heart. They loved. They built societies and passed knowledge from one generation to the next. They did all the things that make us human. How? That is the question that draws us into the heart of this mystery tonight. You see, somewhere around 50,000 to 40,000 years ago, something shifted. The first hand stencils appeared on cave walls. These weren't decorations. They were statements of existence, hand stencils that might have been placed there by Neanderthals, our evolutionary cousins, or by early modern humans. Hands that say, across the centuries and millennia, I was here, I existed, I mattered. But here's what's remarkable. Those paintings were not the beginning of communication. They were the flourishing of something that had already been developing for hundreds of thousands of years. The real question we need to explore is this. Before these paintings, before any symbols on stone, how did our ancestors share the most intimate, the most vital, the most beautiful aspects of being alive? How did they transmit not just information, but meaning? Not just facts, but wisdom? Not just instructions, but love? The world of Homo, erectus and pure, gesture. Close your eyes for a moment, or imagine with me rather, since I need you to hear these words. We're traveling back now, not just to the time of early Homo sapiens, but to the time of Homo erectus. We're speaking of approximately 1.9 million years ago. This number is so vast, it almost loses meaning. To put it in perspective, modern humans have existed for around 300,000 years. Homo erectus existed for approximately 1.5 to 2 million years. They are the longest-lived human species we know of. Our species has only been around for less than 1/10 of their duration on Earth. The sun is rising over the African savanna. It is warm, but not unpleasantly so. A family group, perhaps 20 to 30 individuals, awakens near their makeshift shelter. These beings are remarkable. They stand upright. They walk and run with efficiency. Their brains are nearly double the size of their earlier ancestors. They are not quite human as we would recognize human, yet they are unmistakably in the process of becoming something new, something extraordinary. One individual notices movement at the edge of the plain, an antelope, a source of precious protein. Nearby, another member of the group needs to be told. The hunting opportunity is significant. The meat could feed several mouths for days. But here is the challenge. There are no words for antelope. There is no word for hunting party. There is no language, not language in the sense we understand it. Yet watch what happens in this moment of coordinated activity. A gesture, a simple movement of the arm. It points toward the animal. The body of the gesture shifts in a direction, eyes fixed on the target. The attention itself becomes the message. Another member sees this. Their body immediately mirrors the attention. Perhaps a sound accompanies it. Not a word, but a particular vocalization that has come to mean something specific within this group. A specific grunt or call at a specific pitch. The meaning is clear not because of the sound alone, but because the sound is married to the gesture, to the body language, to the direction of gaze. Others begin to move. They don't need a full explanation of the plan. Their minds, evolved through hundreds of thousands of years of living and hunting together, understand the story their companions' bodies are telling. They know from the tenseness in shoulders how urgent this is. They know from the pace of movement whether this is a chase to be conducted right now or if preparation is needed. They know from the energy in the group whether this is a hunt likely to succeed or whether they should wait. This is the first language, not the language of sound, the language of the body. Recent research has revealed something quite striking. When scientists asked volunteers to communicate ideas using only vocalizations, mimicking what they theorized pre-linguistic humans might have done, the results were surprisingly poor. People failed to convey information effectively using only grunts and calls. Their communication was ambiguous. Meanings were lost. Confusion was common, but when those same volunteers were asked to use hand gestures and body language to communicate complex ideas, suddenly they became remarkably successful. Ideas that were muddled through sound became crystal clear through movement. Spatial relationships became obvious. Intentions became transparent. This tells us something profound about our evolutionary past. For over 1 million years, perhaps much longer, human communication may have been primarily visual and gestural. The hands moved through space telling stories. The face shifted and changed, communicating emotions before any sound existed to name them. The body itself, the posture, the tension, the placement in space, conveyed meaning with precision. Think about what this implies. It means that in the beginning, we did not grunt our way toward language. We gestured. We signaled with our entire bodies. We communicated through position and movement and the quality of our presence. Consider the great apes, our closest living relatives. Chimpanzees and bonobos do not communicate primarily through vocalizations. Their vocalizations are actually quite limited. They communicate through gesture. They point. They reach. They make movements that others understand. Some researchers have noted that different chimpanzee groups have different gesture cultures, different ways of signaling within each community. This is not instinct. This is learned behavior passed down through groups. This suggests that gesture is not merely biological, but cultural. It can be learned, shared, and refined across generations. We've inherited this. Within each of us lives this ancient knowledge. You know this instinctively. When you're in a loud room at a party where words become secondary, you rely on facial expressions. You read someone based on the angle of their body toward you or away. You sense openness or guardedness in their posture. You read confidence not by what someone says, but by how they stand. You see fear in how shoulders tense. You see joy in how a person moves toward you. You understand these things without conscious effort. Every human being on Earth, despite their language, despite their culture, carries with them the capacity to communicate through gesture with a sophistication that rivals language itself. Our ancestors understood pointing before they understood grammar. A simple extension of the arm toward an object was probably one of the earliest forms of symbolic communication among our kind. An infant today, barely capable of speaking clear words, masters the point, the ability to direct another's attention to something external. This is profound. This is one of the fundamental building blocks of all communication. The ability to take something in your mind and direct another being's attention toward it. But gestures became more elaborate as human brains evolved and human societies grew more complex over hundreds of thousands of years. They developed systems. As researchers have theorized, by the time Homo erectus was creating increasingly sophisticated tools, hand axes and cleavers dating back approximately 1.76 million years ago, they were likely developing increasingly sophisticated gesture systems as well. Not just pointing at immediate objects, but describing actions. One hand might move to show how something falls. Another might trace the shape of an animal to be hunted. Multiple hands might work together to show a hunting strategy. The body became a canvas on which stories could be painted. The space around a person became a stage. As we move from Homo erectus toward Homo neanderthalensis, our distant cousins who lived in Europe and Asia, and eventually toward modern Homo sapiens, we see brain sizes increasing continually. We see toolkits becoming more complex, more specialized, more suited to specific purposes. We see evidence that these beings were planning ahead for longer periods of time. We see evidence of cooperation on larger scales. We see evidence that knowledge was being passed across generations, not just within a single group, but perhaps across groups. All of this would have required communication systems that were far more sophisticated than simple emotional vocalizations. All of this would have required some form of language, even if that language was primarily gestural. Here is something that moves me deeply. Anthropologists and linguists who study modern deaf communities have discovered something remarkable. When deaf children who have never been exposed to formal sign language come together, when they're placed in new schools or communities where sign language suddenly surrounds them, something extraordinary happens within a few years. Sometimes within months, they spontaneously invent their own sign language. They do this without instruction from adults. They do this through pure gesture, through the human drive to communicate and be understood. They create grammar, they create syntax, they develop the ability to discuss past events and imagine future ones. They do this through movement alone. They create a complete language system from nothing. This suggests something profound, that gesture-based communication might have been a complete language system for our ancient ancestors. Not a primitive precursor to spoken language, but an actual full language. A language that could convey complex ideas, emotions, instructions, and narratives. A language that could express the full range of human thought and feeling. Researchers who study language evolution increasingly theorize that human language may have begun as a sign language, a gesture-based system that was fully linguistic in all its complexity before slowly incorporating vocalizations, and only eventually becoming primarily vocal-based as our vocal apparatus evolved over millions of years to accommodate more precise sound production. And here's what I want you to feel, not just think about. Our ancestors stood in circles around fires, their faces illuminated by flickering orange light. They gestured, they moved, they made their bodies speak. And in that silence, a silence broken only by the crackling of flames and perhaps the calls of distant animals, they were fully expressing what it means to be human. They were telling stories. They were teaching the young how to hunt, how to make fire, how to survive. They were expressing fear and courage. They were mourning the dead and celebrating births. They were creating culture, moment by moment, gesture by gesture. They were doing everything we do now, just without words. The face as poetry and window to the soul. If gesture was the grammar of early human communication, the face was its poetry. The face, that most visible, most emotionally expressive part of our bodies, was perhaps the first and most profound dictionary our species ever created. It was a lexicon written in muscle and blood. Let us consider the observations of Charles Darwin, the naturalist of evolution. He traveled the world extensively, studied human societies across numerous continents, and examined animals from every region imaginable. One of his central conclusions was striking and remains relevant today. Certain facial expressions are not learned but appear to be innate. They are hardwired into us. They emerge from our neurology. He discovered this by observing infants who had never seen another person display a particular expression. Yet these infants could produce that same expression themselves. A frown of displeasure, a smile of contentment, a look of fear. These emerge from within the child, not learned from without. Why would this be? Why would millions of years of evolution equip us with specific facial expressions that communicate without words? The answer, I believe, lies in the fact that for most of human history, the face was a communication device of paramount importance. It was as important as words are to us now, perhaps more important. Let's explore the specific expressions that likely emerged very early in our evolutionary history. Consider fear. When a human being experiences fear, several things happen on the face. The eyes widen, and this is not accidental or purposeless. When your eyes widen, your field of vision expands immediately. Your ability to track movement improves. Your pupils dilate, letting in more light so you can see threats more clearly in darkness or dim light. The eyebrows raise upward. The mouth may open in a slight gasp. All of these changes serve a purpose beyond communication. They are optimizations for survival. The face transforms into a sensor, gathering as much information as possible about the threat. Yet, over time, our ancestors noticed this. They saw the fear in each other's faces and recognized it instantly. They understood what the expression meant. And something remarkable happened. The expression became not just a side effect of the emotion, but a communication device. It became a way to alert group members to danger without words, without sounds that might scare away prey or draw the attention of predators. A single individual's face could alert an entire group. Terror could be communicated in an instant. Consider disgust. When you encounter something foul, something rotten, something poisonous, your nose wrinkles, your upper lip curls slightly, your eyes narrow. What is happening biologically? Your body is instinctively protecting itself. Wrinkling the nose reduces the intake of foul-smelling air and airborne particles. Narrowing the eyes defends against particles entering the eye. But again, group members saw this on the faces of their companions and understood instantly. Something is wrong here. Something is dangerous. Do not consume this. Do not go near this. The disgust signal became a survival mechanism for the entire group. Anger. When rage takes hold, the jaw clenches, the brows furrow, drawing together. The eyes narrow, creating what we call a hard stare, a direct, intense gaze that can be seen from a distance. The face becomes a mask of intensity, of potential aggression. Other members of the group saw this and understood. This individual is dangerous right now. This is not a good time to approach them. Do not provoke them further. In small groups where everyone lived in close proximity, being able to read another person's anger level through their face was literally a matter of survival. But these are the difficult emotions. There were also beautiful ones. Happiness, the smile, the universal expression that says without words, all is well. Safety, community, joy. When a mother looked at her infant with a genuine smile, the kind that involved not just the lips but the entire face, including the eyes, a phenomenon called the Duchenne smile, what was communicated? Security, love, belonging. The infant, though not yet capable of understanding words, understood this communication perfectly. This was the beginning of human bonding. Think about trust, because this is crucial to understanding why facial expression became so important in our evolution. In small groups, and for most of human history, we lived in groups of 50 to 150 individuals. Trusting the wrong person could mean death. It could mean resources being stolen, children being harmed, the group's safety being compromised. It could mean disease brought into the group or betrayal during a hunt. The face became a window into intention. A careful observer could read intention in the subtlest movements of muscles around the eyes and mouth. Could this person be trusted? Was that smile genuine or deceiving? Was that concern in their face sincere or false? Was that promise in their eyes real? Research in modern times has revealed something remarkable. Researchers have identified what appear to be 6 basic emotions that appear across virtually all human cultures and all human societies. I note that recent research has added nuance to this. Understanding, culture, and learning absolutely shape how we express and interpret emotion. And there are regional and cultural differences in what emotions are considered appropriate to display. But these 6 appear with remarkable consistency. Happiness, sadness, anger, fear, surprise, and disgust. These are the emotions that correlate most strongly with survival. These are the emotions that, when clearly communicated through the face, help groups function more effectively, and individuals make good decisions about threat and safety. Our ancestors' faces became increasingly expressive over millions of years. The muscles that control facial expression became more refined and more numerous. The brain regions that interpret facial expressions became more sophisticated. This co-evolution of expression and interpretation created an ever more sophisticated system of nonverbal communication. Over time, the human face developed more muscles controlling expression than most other primates. We developed the capacity for nuance. We could express not just anger, but different kinds of anger, rage, frustration, irritation. Not just sadness, but different kinds of sadness, grief, melancholy, disappointment. And here's something beautiful. Even though we have language now, we have not abandoned the face. You still watch another person's face to understand what they really mean, beyond what their words say. A person can say, "I'm fine," while their face, their eyes specifically, tells you they are profoundly not fine. There's an internal rupture between their words and their expression. We all sense this immediately. We are still reading faces the way our ancestors did. The facial language is still there, still vital, still the foundation of how we truly connect with one another. Imagine a scene from 100,000 years ago. A young person in the tribe is learning something difficult, learning how to make a tool, how to track an animal through the bush, how to understand the rituals and customs of the group. They don't have an instruction manual. They don't have words like, "hold it this way," or "turn it like that." But they watch the face of the elder as they learn. They read encouragement in a smile. They read correction in a shift of the mouth. They read praise in the brightening of the eyes. They read disapproval in the drawing down of the brows. And through this facial language, combined with gesture and demonstration, they internalize knowledge. They become capable. They survive. They eventually teach these same things to others. This is why the face evolved to be so expressive. Not to deceive, though certainly deception became possible once language developed, but to reveal genuine emotion. Not to hide intention, but to signal it. The human face became what one researcher called a billboard of intention, a clear display of what someone was likely to do next, what they were feeling, whether they were trustworthy or dangerous. And this brings us to, as something profound, eye contact. The eyes, more than any other part of the face, seem to convey truth. In most Western cultures, we speak of looking someone in the eye as an act of honesty and courage. Breaking eye contact suggests dishonesty or shame. Maintaining eye contact suggests confidence and trustworthiness. This is not universal. Some cultures view prolonged eye contact as aggressive or disrespectful. But the power of eye contact is deep in our nature. Why? Because in the eyes, the pupils dilate and constrict. These changes are largely involuntary. They happen automatically. A human being might control their words. They might arrange their face deliberately. They might practice lying. But the pupils often reveal truth. They dilate when we look at something we like, something beautiful, someone we find attractive, something that interests us. They constrict when we encounter something we dislike or fear. In low light, pupils dilate automatically as the eye tries to gather more light. But they also dilate when we're attracted to someone or something. Our ancestors, over countless generations, learned to read these tiny changes. They learned that the eyes were the most honest part of the face, the portal to genuine emotion, the mirror of the soul, sound, ritual, and the emergence of meaningful vocalization. But the face and gesture were not the whole story. They were never the whole story. Somewhere in the evolution of human communication, sound began to play an increasing role. Not yet language in the modern sense, but something approaching it. Something transitional, something that would eventually transform into the spoken words we use today. Let us consider the sounds that early humans made. These vocalizations were not random. They were not meaningless noise. They were meaningful sounds. A particular call that signified danger. Perhaps a sharp, high-pitched sound that would alert others quickly and carry across distances. A different call that meant food had been found, perhaps a lower, more comfortable sound that wouldn't scare away the food source. These sounds were not arbitrary. They were learned and understood within the group. A child growing up in the tribe learned these sounds the way you learn language, through exposure, through trial and error, through social reinforcement and correction from elders. Many animals have such systems. Certain birds have different calls for predators in the sky versus predators on the ground. Different vervet monkeys have different vocalizations for different types of predators, and remarkably, young monkeys have to learn to interpret these calls correctly. Different primates have different vocalizations for different types of danger. What made human vocalizations gradually different was their capacity to be modified, refined, combined in new ways, and adapted to new situations. Humans were not locked into a fixed set of calls. As human brains grew larger over millions of years, and the structures that control vocalization became more sophisticated, our ancestors' capability to produce varied sounds increased. The larynx, the structure in the throat that produces sound, evolved in humans to allow for a wider range of frequencies and more precise control. This likely happened gradually, over hundreds of thousands of years. It was not a sudden change, but a slow refinement. The fossil record shows us that early humans and Neanderthals probably could not produce the full range of human speech sounds, but they were likely moving in that direction, evolving slowly toward greater vocal capacity. And importantly, this is crucial, vocalization became intertwined with gesture and ritual. Imagine a hunting party preparing to depart early in the morning when the light is just beginning to touch the horizon. There would be gestures, pointing in directions, showing what they plan to do. But there would also be sounds, perhaps chanting or rhythmic vocalizations that coordinated movement, that built courage and confidence in the hunters, that unified the group emotionally in preparation for the dangers ahead. Perhaps particular sounds that meant, "Let's go now," or "Wait, not yet," or "Gather here." These sounds would have been tied to action and gesture. Consider the role of rhythm and sound in ritual. Early human societies likely had rituals, ceremonies marking important events, birth, death, the change of seasons, the successful hunt. These rituals would have involved synchronized movement, coordinated sound, the kind of shared experience that creates profound group cohesion. When people move together, chant together, beat drums together, something happens neurologically. The brain states synchronize, heart rates align, people feel connected at a visceral level. The sense of being part of something larger than oneself becomes overwhelming. Our ancestors likely used this. They likely gathered in circles, probably around fire when fire became a regular technology. And through sound and movement together, they created experiences of profound unity. The sound reinforced the gesture reinforced the sound. The movement brought people into synchronization, and the whole created a communication that was simultaneously practical, conveying information, and deeply emotional, binding the group together at a level that goes beyond words. Archaeological evidence supports this theory, though interpretation remains open to debate. We find evidence of flutes made from bone, dating back to over 40,000 years ago in Europe. These weren't simple toys. The craftsmanship was sophisticated. Multiple holes for different notes, instruments used to make music, or perhaps to produce meaningful sounds and rituals. The fact that humans invested the time and effort to create instruments for sound making suggests that sound had significant meaning in their culture. We find hand stencils on cave walls in Spain and elsewhere, apparently marking presence and ritual importance. The hand stencil says, "I was here." What ritual might have accompanied the making of these stencils? Did groups gather to make them? Were there sounds? Were there songs? The record doesn't tell us exactly, but the presence of such marks suggests ritual activity. We find evidence of burial practices, bodies placed in graves with care, sometimes with objects placed alongside them, sometimes with colored pigment. This tells us that death had meaning, that the person who died mattered, that mourning was an important group activity, and mourning certainly would have involved sound. All of this would have involved sound. Perhaps the first uses of vocalizations in increasingly symbolic ways were not primarily about describing external objects or actions. They were about expressing internal states, about creating connection through shared sound, about the rituals that bound humans together and gave their lives meaning. Sound was the technology of emotion. Imagine a funeral ceremony 50,000 years ago. The body of a respected elder lies before the group. The people are grieving. They have lost someone important. A low sound begins, perhaps a wail, perhaps a chant, perhaps something more rhythmic and organized. It is not words. It does not describe grief. It is grief. Others join in. The sound becomes a wave that moves through the group, expressing collective sorrow. There are no words for "we are sad" or "we will miss you." But the sound communicates all of this. It creates a shared emotional experience. It binds the living to the memory of the dead. It is profoundly human. The vocalization slowly became more complex, more differentiated, more capable of subtle variations that conveyed increasingly specific meanings. Perhaps particular sounds came to mean not just danger, but danger from predators on the ground versus danger from predators in the sky. Perhaps sounds began to be used to describe not just present events but past events. We hunted yesterday. Through some combination of vocalization and gesture. Perhaps the combination of vocalizations became more like language. But for many tens of thousands of years, perhaps hundreds of thousands of years, this vocalization remained intimately tied to the visual. It remained connected to gesture and facial expression, to the entire body's participation in communication. The voice was one instrument in an orchestra. It was not yet the dominant instrument. The dawn of symbolic thinking. Now we approach something remarkable, something that changed the nature of human communication fundamentally, something that opened up entirely new possibilities for how humans could represent and share reality. The emergence of symbolic thinking, the ability to create something and have it represent something else entirely, the ability to create meaning beyond the immediate and physical. This is different from gesture, which mimics or directly indicates. A gesture that shows the shape of a hunted animal actually resembles that animal in some way. A hand tracing through the air follows the curve of a creature's body. The relationship between the gesture and the thing it represents is motivated. It makes intuitive sense. But a symbol is arbitrary. There is no inherent reason why a particular mark should mean a particular thing. A circle could mean the sun, or completeness, or danger, or the people, or 1,000 other things, depending on what the community collectively decides it means. This is symbolic abstraction. This is something new. When did this emerge? Archaeological evidence suggests that around 100,000 years ago, we see the first clear signs of symbolic behavior in Africa. This is somewhat debated among researchers, and the interpretation of early symbolic behavior remains complex. But the evidence is suggestive. Perforated beads have been found, suggesting that objects were being chosen and modified for their symbolic value, not their utility. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, researchers discovered carefully crafted ochre stones with geometric patterns etched into them. These objects had no practical survival purpose. They served no obvious function in hunting, making shelter, or creating tools. They were made for meaning. They were symbols. Evidence from Blombos Cave is particularly striking. Researchers have found shells, specifically Nassarius shells, that appear to have been deliberately perforated. The holes were made with precision. Multiple shells show evidence of wear patterns suggesting they were strung together and worn as beads. The dates for these artifacts range from approximately 70,000 to 100,000 years ago. But why would someone spend time creating perforated shells to wear? The practical answer is, there's no reason. The symbolic answer is, to show identity, to show status, to show group membership, to create beauty, to express the self. Other artifacts from Blombos include pieces of ochre, soft, iron-rich red stone that have been worked and shaped, often with geometric patterns incised into them, cross-hatching, parallel lines, branching patterns. These patterns show evidence of intentional creation. They're not random scratches, but deliberate designs. Some pieces show evidence of being ground down in particular areas before the patterns were incised, suggesting a multi-stage process. Ochre was precious. It had to be found, gathered, shaped, and refined. Spending this much effort on creating patterns suggests that the patterns held meaning. But the truly staggering evidence of symbolic thinking, visible symbolic thinking, not just thinking about symbols, appears with cave paintings. And this is where we need to pause and breathe and really take in the magnitude of what we're discussing. This is where human culture truly explodes into visibility. The dating of the earliest cave paintings is somewhat complex and continues to be refined by researchers. What we can say is that some of the earliest hand stencils and simple paintings found in Spanish caves date to approximately 40,800 years ago, or possibly older. One red disc from El Castillo cave in Spain has been dated using uranium series dating to at least 40,800 years ago, making it possibly the oldest known European cave art. Hand stencils from the same site were found to be at least 37,300 years old. Other paintings in European caves, including those at Chauvet in France, date to around 32,000 to 39,000 years ago, though these dates are debated and continue to be refined as dating techniques improve. Indonesian cave paintings show similar ages. Hand stencils dated to approximately 39,900 years ago. What's remarkable is not just the age, but the sophistication. When you consider that these caves were in semi-darkness, lit only by torches or primitive lamps using animal fat, the level of skill is extraordinary. The Chauvet cave in France contains over 1,000 images. The paintings are not crude or simple. They display remarkable skill. Animals are rendered with careful attention to anatomy. Horses are depicted with perspective. Different pigments are used: black charcoal, red and yellow ochre. Techniques are sophisticated. Walls are prepared before painting. The arrangement of images on the walls seems deliberate and thoughtful. These are not the works of unskilled hands. And here's what's remarkable and what I want to convey to you. These paintings are among the most moving artworks ever created by human beings. Standing before a 35,000 to 40,000-year-old image of a horse drawn by an unknown hand, feeling a visceral connection across an abyss of time to the mind that created it. This experience is profound. In that moment, you understand viscerally that consciousness is ancient, that art is ancient, that the human drive to create meaning is ancient, that humans have always needed beauty. What were these images communicating? Scholars debate this actively. Some suggest they were about hunting magic, that creating images of hunted animals was a way of ensuring successful hunts, a magical act. If you could capture the essence of the animal in paint, perhaps you could capture it in the hunt as well. Others believe they were spiritual or shamanistic in purpose. Perhaps certain people entered trance states and then attempted to paint what they had experienced in those states. Still others think they were simply art created because the impulse to create was part of being human. Perhaps all of these are true simultaneously. But what's crucial is this: the painters were engaging in symbolic thought at the highest level. They recognized that a mark made on a wall could represent something else entirely. They understood that others would come to this dark cave, often deep within the earth, accessed only through narrow passages, and would understand what these images meant. They were creating a form of communication that would persist beyond the moment, beyond the painter's lifetime, that would reach across time itself. This is profound. This is the birth of writing, not yet in the sense of written language, but in the sense of making meaning permanent, making meaning that transcends the moment, making meaning that can be preserved and passed on. Imagine a young person in this ancient time being taken deep into a cave by their elder. The cave is dark, lit only by flickering torches that cast dancing shadows on the walls. The air is cool and slightly damp. The young person's heart may be beating with anticipation or fear. This is a sacred space. As they move deeper, the painted animals begin to appear. "Look here," the elder might gesture. "This is the great bison we hunted 3 seasons past. This is the knowledge of how to survive. This is the wisdom we are giving to you. This is the proof that we succeeded. This is the story of our people. The image becomes a story, becomes a lesson, becomes a memory made visible. The image becomes a bridge between past and present, between one generation and the next. And what can be shown on a wall can also be shown on bone, on clay, on portable objects. Archaeological evidence shows that as the ability to create and interpret symbols grew, humans began creating imagery on portable items. Small Venus figurines, representations of female bodies, sometimes with exaggerated features of sexuality or fertility, dating from around 35,000 to 40,000 years ago, carved animals, abstract geometric patterns. These objects were small enough to be carried, to be shown, to be used in ceremonies or rituals. They could travel. They could be kept and protected. They were objects of meaning and power. By approximately 50,000 years ago, based on genetic and archaeological evidence, modern humans had begun spreading out of Africa, carrying with them this capacity for symbolic thought. This is around the time period that archaeologists call the Upper Paleolithic in Europe, roughly 40,000 to 10,000 years ago, when we see an explosion of cultural innovation and artistic expression. By 30,000 years ago, the Neanderthals, our evolutionary cousins who had lived in Europe and Asia for over 200,000 years, had disappeared from the fossil record, and modern humans alone walked the earth. And with them, this incredible capacity to make meaning visible, to communicate through symbols, to create culture at an unprecedented level. The dynamics had been irrevocably altered. Communication was no longer limited to the immediate, to the present moment, to the people physically present. You could create something today that would communicate something years from now, to people you would never meet. You could tell stories that would outlive you. The emotions expressed in the face, the stories told through gesture, the connections created through ritual and shared sound, all of these remained essential. They did not go away. But now, a new dimension was added. The ability to create something that represented something else. The ability to say without words, I was hunting. This is what I saw. This is what we did. This is what will help you survive. This is who we are. The emergence of proto-language. We are now approaching the threshold of what scholars call proto-language. Not yet language as we know it, not yet the complex grammar and syntax that characterizes modern human language, but something moving decisively in that direction. This transition may have occurred somewhere between 100,000 and 50,000 years ago, though the exact timing remains uncertain and hotly debated among researchers. The fossil record doesn't speak clearly on this matter. We're reading between lines, making inferences from behavior and brain development. Proto-language, as linguists conceive it, is a stage of language development where meaningful sounds or symbols have become associated with specific meanings. There's a connection between sound and concept, but the language hasn't yet developed the complex rules of grammar and syntax that allow for infinite recombination and abstraction. A speaker of proto-language might have had hundreds or even thousands of meaningful sounds or signs. They might have been able to combine them in certain ways, but the ability to combine them in entirely new ways to create entirely new meanings, the generative property that defines modern human language, may not yet have fully emerged. This is somewhat theoretical, and there's legitimate debate about whether such a stage actually existed as a distinct phase, or whether language emerged more gradually or suddenly. Let me paint a scene for you. It's approximately 75,000 years ago, somewhere on the African continent. We're near a major river in what is now South Africa. A community of humans, let's say 100 or 120 individuals living together, has established itself near this reliable water source. They hunt, they gather, they create. They have rituals that mark important moments, and they communicate through an elaborate system that now involves gesture, facial expression, vocalization, and shared understanding of symbolic meanings. Each layer builds on the others. One day, a particular individual, we might call them a proto-speaker, someone who is particularly gifted with communication and perhaps a bit of an innovator, uses a new combination of sounds to describe something. Perhaps they're trying to describe a particularly successful hunt that happened in a place the group hadn't hunted in a long time. They have already gestured and made the sounds they usually make, but something new is needed, so they combine sounds in a new way, or they add a new sound they've invented. It works, others understand, the combination is used again. It becomes standard. Over generations, these combinations multiply. A simple system becomes more complex, more sophisticated. New concepts can be expressed. Evidence for this stage might be found in the behavior of modern non-human primates, particularly great apes. This is not to say that apes are proto-linguistic. They are not. But they do demonstrate complex social understanding. They use gestures in sophisticated ways. Different chimpanzee populations have different gesture cultures. If you watch chimpanzees from one region and chimpanzees from another region, you'll notice they gesture differently. They've learned different ways of communicating within their communities. Some researchers have taught apes sign languages, not natural language, but symbolic sign systems. And these apes demonstrate an understanding of meaning. They can combine signs in new ways. They can understand abstract concepts. They can use symbols for things not present. They can use symbols for past and future. They can create novel combinations of signs. This suggests that a proto-human or early modern human might have had communication abilities similar to, or perhaps exceeding those of modern apes. The ability to use symbols meaningfully, to combine them in new ways, to understand abstract concepts, but not yet the full grammatical structure of modern human language with all its complexity. An important theory in linguistics suggests that this proto-language may have been particularly visual, based on gesture and sign. Only gradually did vocalization become more central, as the human vocal apparatus evolved to allow for more precise and varied sound production. The larynx continued to change. The brain regions controlling speech continued to develop. This theory suggests that the first true languages might have been sign languages, only later becoming primarily vocal after humans had fully developed the neurological and anatomical capacity for complex speech. Why would this be? It's theoretically elegant. If communication began visually, with gesture and sign, then it was already fully human in its structure and complexity. Vocalizations could be added gradually as the capacity developed. You wouldn't need a sudden magical emergence of language. It would be a gradual addition of another modality to a system that was already sophisticated. Support for this comes from the fact that modern deaf communities independently invent sign languages with full linguistic complexity when deaf people gather together. These languages include grammar, they include syntax, they include the ability to create new words and sentences. They include the ability to discuss abstract concepts and hypothetical situations. They include metaphor and poetry. They include all the properties that define modern human language. The fact that humans will spontaneously create such languages when given the opportunity, without instruction, without models, suggests that language ability is deeply embedded in human nature. It doesn't require vocalization. It can work perfectly well with gesture. Around 50,000 years ago, this date is somewhat approximate and debated. Something changed. Genetic evidence suggests that at this point, all modern human populations already possess the capacity for language. This suggests that language emerged before the major dispersals of humans out of Africa, around 60,000 to 80,000 years ago. But the archaeological record shows a sudden and explosive flourishing of human culture around this time, or perhaps a bit later. Art appears. Sophisticated tools proliferate. Humans begin moving into previously challenging environments. The Upper Paleolithic period in Europe, beginning around 40,000 years ago, is characterized by an explosion of cultural innovation, bone tools, carved figurines, cave paintings, multiple artistic traditions, specialized tools for specific purposes, trade networks spanning large distances, jewelry, clothing. Why? Scholars theorize that this represents the emergence of fully modern language. Not proto-language, not gesture combined with early vocalizations, not a system limited to describing immediate, observable things, but actual language, actual grammar, actual syntax. The ability to create new words by adding suffixes or changing forms. The ability to embed clauses within clauses. The ability to express past, present, and future. The ability to discuss hypothetical situations. The ability to create infinite novelty from finite materials. The ability to coordinate complex activities involving many individuals with precision. The ability to transmit detailed knowledge across generations. The ability to create abstract concepts and discuss them explicitly. Think about what this would have meant. With proto-language, a hunter might communicate hunt, deer, danger. Simple, direct, based on what is immediately observable or recently past. But with language, that same hunter could say, 3 seasons ago, I saw 3 deer by the river bend. 2 were young, which means the mother was nearby. We hunted there for an hour but didn't succeed because the wind was against us. Tomorrow, I propose we go back at dawn, when the wind comes from another direction. I have observed that in the morning, the wind comes from the east, pushing our scent away from the deer. The hunt will be more successful. Alternatively, if the wind were to change tonight, we might hunt tomorrow, but I don't think it will. In my experience, after this type of weather, the wind continues from the same direction for several more days. This level of detail, this temporal complexity, this ability to share not just immediate observations, but reasoning and planning, this would transform a community fundamentally. It would allow for more efficient hunting, more complex tool-making, elaborate rituals, complex stories that explain why the world works the way it does, moral instruction, religious teaching. The transmission of knowledge that took generations to acquire could now be transmitted in hours. And here's something crucial. Language allowed humans to tell lies, to deceive, to manipulate, but it also allowed humans to tell jokes, to create irony, to create art forms beyond visual representation, to create beauty through words, to bond across gulfs of time and distance through stories. Language opened up possibilities for both tremendous good and tremendous harm. With language came the ability to ask why endlessly, to create stories that explained natural phenomena, to wonder about the stars and the earth and the origins of things, to imagine futures that didn't exist yet, to create what we call culture at a level of complexity that had never been seen before. The pace of innovation accelerated, new tools appeared more frequently, populations grew, humans spread to new continents, and all of this was built on the foundation of what came before. The facial expressions that revealed emotion, the gestures that conveyed action, the symbols that represented meaning, the rituals that bound communities together. Language didn't replace these older systems. It built upon them. Language added a new layer to communication, but the earlier layers remained and remain even now. We still use our faces, we still gesture, we still create rituals, we still communicate non-verbally constantly. Once humans possessed fully modern language, the world transformed. Not immediately, not all at once, but over generations and centuries and millennia. The possibilities expanded exponentially. The pace of change accelerated. What had been static or slowly changing became dynamic and rapidly evolving. Language made possible forms of cooperation that were previously impossible or at least much more difficult to achieve. Consider a complex hunt. With gesture and proto-language, a group could coordinate basic actions. Everyone understands. We hunt today. We hunt this animal. We go that direction. The basic structure is established. But with language, a leader could explain a strategy in detail. We will form 3 groups. This group will approach from the north, slowly, trying not to be seen. Keep the wind in your favor so the prey doesn't smell you. This group will circle around to the south and the east. You should move carefully and quietly. When you hear this sound, and the leader could demonstrate the sound, that means the prey is moving in your direction, or I see the prey beginning to flee. You will then move quickly toward the noise, trying to direct the animal toward the other hunters. We must work together, or we will fail. If we succeed, We will have meat for many days. If we fail, we will return hungry. This kind of detailed coordination would have made humans extraordinarily effective hunters. We see evidence of this in the archaeological record. Humans began hunting large animals that were previously dangerous or impossible to kill. Mammoths, giant ground sloths, cave bears, creatures that required coordinated planning and execution. Tools became more specialized. Sites show evidence of large-scale organized hunts. The remains show that multiple animals were killed at once, suggesting that coordinated group action was involved. Language also made possible the accumulation of knowledge in a new way. Before language, knowledge had to be learned by observation and imitation. A young person learned how to make a tool by watching and trying repeatedly. Some mistakes were inevitable. The process could take years. Each generation had to partially rediscover what the previous generation knew, because knowledge was lost when people died. But with language, knowledge could be transmitted explicitly and in detail. The copper ore found near the river can be heated in a very hot fire, a fire much hotter than we normally make. You need to add these special stones to make it hotter. And it becomes a different substance entirely. This new substance is harder than stone. It can hold a sharper edge. It works better for certain tools than stone does. Information that might take years to discover through trial and error could now be transmitted in an hour or less. It could be explained clearly. It could be remembered. It could be passed on accurately. This accelerated innovation dramatically. Toolkits became more diverse and more sophisticated. Humans began not just adapting to environments, but shaping them. Setting fires to clear land for hunting, digging wells where water was scarce, building structures, creating agriculture. All of this was enabled by the ability to plan in detail, to share detailed knowledge, to transmit accumulated experience across generations. Language also made possible morality and law in the way we understand them. Without language, social rules were likely enforced through dominance and strength, through the modeling of behavior, through emotional displays and punishment. With language, rules could be articulated explicitly, debated, explained. We do not steal from each other, because if we do, then people will steal from us, and the social trust necessary for cooperation will break down. We do not kill each other except in circumstances of direct threat, because if we do, the victim's family will seek revenge, and conflict will spiral. Moral reasoning became possible. Humans could develop ethical frameworks. They could argue about what was right and wrong. They could create justice systems. They could move beyond simple dominance hierarchies to more complex social organizations. And critically, language made possible history and story in a new way. Humans could now create narratives that explained who they were, where they came from, why the world was the way it was. They could tell elaborate stories of ancestors. They could preserve memory in the form of narrative. They could connect current experience to past events in elaborate ways. A person could learn the history of their people through story, understanding not just what happened, but why it mattered, what lessons it held. Oral traditions became the repository of cultural knowledge and identity. Around 15,000 years ago, we see evidence that humans were using marks on bone and antler to keep records. Tally marks indicating days or months, calendars, the first steps toward writing. Humans were extending memory beyond what a single mind could hold. They were creating external storage for information. Shepherds used tally sticks to keep track of herds. Hunters kept records of successful hunts. People began to mark phases of the moon. By 10,000 years ago, humans had begun farming and living in permanent settlements. The complexity of farming required detailed knowledge of seasons of soil, water management, and crop varieties. Language allowed this knowledge to accumulate and be shared precisely. Communities grew larger. Social hierarchies became more elaborate. The need for record keeping became urgent. You needed to know who had contributed what labor to the harvest. You needed to know who owed grain to the temple or the ruler. You needed to keep records of property and ownership. Stories were not enough. You needed permanent records. You needed writing. Around 5,200 years ago in Mesopotamia, we see the first true writing system, cuneiform, marks pressed into clay that represented not just objects, but sounds, ideas, and grammatical structures. Writing extended the reach of language beyond the moment of speaking. A person in one city could now send detailed information to a person in another city. A ruler could preserve their laws for posterity. A scribe could record a merchant's transaction. Knowledge could be accumulated in a way that individual memory could never achieve. Recipes could be written down. Medical knowledge could be preserved. Mathematical calculations could be recorded. But here's what I want you to understand, and this is something rarely discussed in depth. Writing emerged from a capacity that was already fully human. For tens of thousands of years, humans had possessed language. Full, complex, grammatically sophisticated language. They had created elaborate stories, detailed knowledge systems, complex social structures. They had created art that still moves us. Writing was not the invention of language. It was the invention of a way to preserve language, to extend it beyond the moment, to make it permanent. And even as writing emerged and developed, something profound remained. The oral tradition. Stories told around fires. Knowledge transmitted through recitation and listening. For centuries after writing existed, most humans couldn't read. Most knowledge was still transmitted orally. The poets and storytellers remained the keepers of knowledge and culture. Writing was powerful, but it was not everything. Think about what oral cultures were like. In a society where knowledge is transmitted primarily through speaking and listening, memory becomes paramount. Stories must be memorable, rhythmic, often poetic. They must move the listener emotionally so that the story is retained and passed on. We see this in the epics, Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, the ancient Indian epics like the Mahabharata and Ramayana, the Norse sagas. These were oral traditions preserved in verse form, meant to be recited, meant to be remembered, meant to bind communities together through shared narrative. These are not primitive attempts at literature. These are sophisticated, complex artworks. The human brain, exercised and trained in oral culture, is capable of extraordinary feats of memory. Specialists emerged, bards, griots, storytellers, whose entire life's work was the memorization and recitation of vast bodies of knowledge and story. The Homeric epics, if spoken aloud in their entirety, take approximately 24 hours to recite. Yet professional reciters could memorize them completely. The human memory, when trained and valued, is capable of astounding things. And the emotions transmitted through these stories were powerful. A listener hearing the story of Odysseus's long journey home, told orally, probably sung or chanted, would feel loss, hope, longing, triumph. They would feel the pain of separation and the joy of reunion. A listener hearing the story of Achilles' death would feel grief and the terrible weight of human mortality. These stories did more than transmit information. They shaped how people understood the world. They taught morality. They created identity. They bound communities together. They were the glue holding civilization together. One of the most remarkable aspects of language is its diversity. The moment humans began to live in geographically separated groups, languages began to diverge. A group isolated in a mountain valley would develop a language somewhat different from a group in a coastal area. The sounds would change slightly. New words would be created. Old words would be lost or change meaning. Over generations, these differences accumulated. By the time anthropologists began studying human societies systematically in the 18th and 19th centuries, there were thousands of distinct languages. Many were mutually unintelligible. A speaker of one could not understand a speaker of another without learning. Yet humans across all these languages possess the same fundamental capacity, the same grammar-building ability, the same potential to create new words, new expressions, new ways of saying things. A human child from any language group could learn any other language if given the opportunity. The specific sounds and words were different, but the capacity was universal. The underlying structure was the same. This suggests that the capacity for language is hardwired into human neurology. It's not something that was invented once and then spread. It's something that emerged from human neurology and human social nature. But imagine for a moment, what happened when humans who spoke different languages encountered each other? How did they communicate? They would have relied on the older systems: gesture, facial expression, emotion, and tone of voice. They would have pointed and acted out meanings. They would have drawn pictures in the dirt. They would have used their entire bodies to communicate. Over time, if the two groups spent significant time together, a contact language might emerge, a simplified form of speech that both groups could use. A pidgin, a communication system that combined elements of both languages stripped down to essentials. And if a pidgin became the native language of children born to both groups, children who heard it every day as their first language, it would become a creole, a full, complex language. It wouldn't be a simplified system anymore. It would have grammar. It would have all the complexity of natural language. It would be as capable and sophisticated as any other language. This has happened repeatedly in history. Whenever groups with different languages came together and had children together, those children created new languages. This shows us something beautiful. Even without a shared language, humans could communicate. They would use their faces, their hands, their bodies, their emotional expressiveness. They would be creative in finding ways to be understood. The older systems of communication, the pre-linguistic systems that humans had used for hundreds of thousands of years, remained available to them. They remained accessible and powerful. And this brings us to something I find deeply moving: the universality of human connection. We experience this in our modern world. You might be in a foreign country where you don't speak the language, yet you can smile at a stranger and be smiled at in return. You can see fear or joy on someone's face and understand it immediately. You can gesture and be understood. At some level, beneath and beyond language, we are all connected through these older, deeper systems of communication. The foundations are the same: the capacity to read emotion, to respond to presence, to understand intention through subtle signals. These are human universals. Consider grief, which transcends language entirely. You don't need words to recognize someone's grief. You see it in their posture, shoulders rounded inward, body seeming to collapse in on itself. You see it in their face, the slack muscles, the distant gaze, the eyes that seem to be looking inward rather than outward. You see it in the pace of their movement, slowed, deliberate, as though the person is moving through thick liquid. And you respond with empathy. You move toward them. You might place a hand on their shoulder. You might sit with them in silence. The deepest communications about loss don't require words. The body understands grief at a level that precedes language. Or consider the communication between a parent and a newborn infant. The baby cannot speak, cannot understand words in any meaningful way, cannot follow complex instructions. Yet, communication happens constantly. The baby's cry conveys need. The parent reads the baby's face and body language to understand what is needed. Is the baby hungry? The cry has cry, a particular rhythm and intensity. Is the baby uncomfortable? The baby might stiffen or thrash. Is the baby tired? The baby might rub their eyes repeatedly or become irritable. The parent responds without conscious reasoning. They've learned through observation and through their own parental instinct what each signal means. And the parent speaks to the baby, not expecting the baby to understand the words, but knowing that the tone of voice matters tremendously. A soft voice means safety. A sharp voice means danger or urgency. A playful voice means joy. The baby understands none of the words, but understands all of this perfectly. The infant responds with eye contact, with reaching, with the beginning of a smile. This is communication at its most fundamental. Language is built on this foundation. It doesn't replace this foundation. It builds on top of it. A person can speak words that say one thing, while their tone and facial expression communicate something entirely different. And when there's a conflict between the words and the nonverbal communication, most people trust the nonverbal communication. A person can say, "I'm not angry," while their face and tone say, "I am furious." And we sense what is really true. As language developed and became more sophisticated, It might seem that these older systems would become less important, but they didn't. They remained. They remain because they communicate things that language cannot. Love cannot be fully conveyed in words. It must be shown in touch, in the eyes, in the quality of presence. Trust cannot be spoken into existence. It must be demonstrated through action and emotional honesty. Wonder cannot be adequately described. It must be felt and witnessed. These experiences require more than words. And here's something crucial. People who have become very skilled with language often forget how powerful these older systems are. They rely on words when words are insufficient. They speak when they should be silent. They explain when they should simply be present. They argue their point when they should simply listen. They miss the nonverbal communication happening right in front of them because they're too focused on the words. But humans who consciously return to these older systems, who look someone in the eye, who speak from emotional truth rather than intellectual formulation, who allow silence and gesture to carry meaning, find that communication deepens, connection deepens, understanding becomes more genuine. I want to turn our attention now to something that I think is profoundly important. The silent world didn't end. It didn't disappear when language emerged. It persists. It lives within us. It shapes how we communicate even now, even with all our technology and our words. Think about a moment when you've been truly understood without words. Perhaps you were struggling with something difficult, grief, fear, confusion, a moral dilemma, and someone sat with you. In their presence, in the quality of their attention, in the way they looked at you, you felt known, felt held, felt less alone. No elaborate explanation was necessary. The communication happened at a level beyond language. Or think about moments of genuine connection with another person. Perhaps you made eye contact with someone across a room. Perhaps in that moment, a moment that lasted only a second or two, you felt a spark of recognition, of connection, of understanding. What was communicated? Nothing that could be translated into words. Yet something real and meaningful happened. Or think about being in the presence of someone you love deeply. Sometimes the most intimate moments are silent. You sit together. Maybe you're watching a sunset or a fire. Maybe you're just present with each other. No words are needed. Perhaps no words would improve the moment. You understand each other. You are known. These moments are remnants of the silent world. They are glimpses into how our ancestors communicated for hundreds of thousands of years. And they're available to us now, if we slow down enough to access them. Modern neuroscience has begun to explore this more rigorously. Researchers have found that when two people are truly engaged in conversation, truly connected and present with each other, their brain patterns actually synchronize. The speaker's brain and the listener's brain move into alignment. They're quite literally on the same wavelength. Their brainwaves show similar patterns. Their heart rates begin to align. But this synchronization happens not through the words alone, but through the entire communication system. The tone of voice, the pacing and rhythm, the facial expressions, the body language, the moment-to-moment responsiveness. All of this affects whether true understanding and connection occur. The words are just one part of the whole. There are certain professions that rely heavily on reading these nonverbal communications. Therapists, for instance, train for years to notice subtle shifts in a client's face, posture, and tone. A client might say they're fine, but their body tells a different story. Their shoulders are tense, their jaw is clenched, their eyes are distant. A skilled therapist reads this silence and responds to what the body is communicating. They might say, "I hear that you're saying you're fine, but I notice your shoulders are very tense. What's happening there?" And the client might then access something they hadn't consciously realized they were feeling. Similarly, physicians learn to read patients through observation. A careful doctor notices not just what a patient says about their symptoms, but how they hold themselves, how they breathe, what their face reveals. A person in pain holds their body differently than a person who is healthy. A person who is anxious about something breathes differently. A person who is depressed moves differently. These are silent communications that doctors learn to read. Musicians and dancers have preserved a direct connection to this ancient world. When musicians perform together, they're not just following sheets of written notation. They're reading each other constantly. They're watching the conductor's face and body to understand the emotional intent of the piece. They're listening to the other musicians not just for the notes, but for the spaces between the notes, the breath, the feeling. A great musical performance is a conversation without words, a dialogue of emotion and intention. The musicians are having a conversation in sound, but the conversation is enabled by constant visual and emotional communication. Dance is perhaps the purest modern expression of the ancient gestural language. The body moving through space tells stories, expresses emotions, creates meanings that don't need translation. You can watch a beautiful dance and be moved emotionally even if it's from a culture completely foreign to you. Even if you don't understand the specific story or symbolism, the human body, moving with intention and grace, speaks a language that transcends cultural boundaries. You feel it in your own body. Your nervous system resonates with what you're seeing. And think about children. Young children, before they have full command of language, communicate with extraordinary clarity. A toddler's face shows exactly what they're feeling. Their body language reveals their wants and fears. They use gesture to request things. They understand social dynamics through observation and imitation. They learn appropriate behavior not primarily through being told with words, but through watching and copying. A child can sense another child's mood instantly. They know when an adult is happy or stressed. Even if the adult is trying to hide it, they're still living partially in the silent world, reading the non-verbal communication that adults often overlook or dismiss. What if we could reclaim more of this capacity? What if we consciously developed our ability to read and express through gesture, face, and body? What if we learned to be more comfortable with silence as a form of communication? I think we would find ourselves more deeply connected to others and more deeply connected to ourselves. There's a practice that some modern people undertake called silent meditation or silent retreat. People gather for days or weeks and commit to speaking not at all. Complete silence. Only the sounds of nature and necessary functional communication through gesture. Yet, remarkable communication continues. The sharing of meals happens. Work gets done. There's an interesting thing that happens. As the verbal noise quiets, people report becoming more aware of the non-verbal communication. The quality of a person's presence, the way they look at you, the way they move through space, the care they take in preparing food or arranging space. People who've participated in these retreats often report feeling more genuinely known by the other participants than they do in their ordinary lives, despite having spoken no words to each other. The silence created space for genuine seeing. This suggests something powerful. Language, for all its sophistication and power, can also obscure. It can fill spaces that might otherwise be filled with genuine connection. It can be a way of avoiding true understanding. Words can be used to create distance, to maintain facades, to hide from authentic connection. We can talk for hours and feel more alone than if we had sat in silence. Our ancestors didn't have this problem. They couldn't hide behind complex language. They couldn't construct elaborate justifications for their behavior. Their faces, their bodies, their presence was immediately apparent to others. This would have created a different kind of social reality. There would have been less capacity for deception, perhaps, but also perhaps less anxiety about judgment based on words and explanations, because judgment would have to be based on who you actually were, not what you said or how skillfully you could articulate things. I'm not suggesting we abandon language. Language is magnificent. It's too powerful, too useful, too much a part of who we are now. But I am suggesting that we have something valuable to learn from recognizing the older systems of communication that remain active within us. It requires us to bring more consciousness to how we communicate as embodied beings, not just as speakers and writers. What would it mean to truly value the gifts that the silent world has left us? What would it mean to consciously develop those capacities that our ancestors relied on for so long? What would change in our lives and relationships if we honored these older systems of communication? First, there's the gift of presence. In the silent world, there was no rushing through communication. There were no text messages, no emails, no quick phone calls. There was no way to communicate at a distance or in writing. Communication happened in the moment, between people who were physically present with each other. This presence, the full attention of another human being, is something we've largely lost in our modern world. We're often physically present with others, but mentally elsewhere. We're having conversations while checking our phones. We're speaking but not truly listening. We're in the same room, but in different worlds. What if we practiced presence? What if we made eye contact and held it for a moment longer than feels comfortable? What if we listened not just to the words, but to the tone, the pace, the spaces between words? What if we noticed how the other person's face moved as they spoke? What if we put our phones away and focused entirely on another person for even just 10 minutes? This kind of presence, this kind of true attention creates connection. It creates safety. It creates the foundation for genuine understanding. There's a particular quality to attention that our ancestors would have known intimately. When you truly attend to another person, when you bring your full consciousness to the moment, to their face, to their energy, something shifts. The other person feels seen. They relax slightly, they open, they become more themselves. Conversely, when someone is only partially attending to you, when they're distracted or checked out, you feel it immediately. You sense the withdrawal, you close down, you protect yourself. Our ancestors lived in communities where full attention was normal, where everyone in the group was present with everyone else, much of the time, where privacy and solitude were rare, where the quality of attention was high. This created a particular kind of social reality. People knew each other deeply, secrets were hard to keep, but also, people were less anxious about being judged because judgment was based on who you actually were, not on what you performed or how well you could explain yourself. What if we could reclaim some of this? What if we practice being fully present with the people we love? Not performing presence, but actually being there. Putting down distractions. Making eye contact. Listening without planning what we're going to say next. Feeling the other person's presence without trying to fix or change them. Second, there's the gift of emotional honesty. In the silent world, emotions couldn't be hidden very well. If you were afraid, your face showed fear. Your body expressed fear. Your voice might crack or shake. Your pupils might dilate. If you were angry, your body expressed anger. You couldn't pretend to feel something you didn't feel. You couldn't lie about your emotional state as easily. You couldn't perform competence if you felt incompetent. You couldn't pretend confidence if you felt terrified. This would have created a culture of emotional authenticity, a culture where people knew where they stood with each other. This doesn't mean people didn't deceive. They certainly did. But deception was harder. Emotional truth was harder to hide. And perhaps because emotional truth was harder to hide, there was a different kind of acceptance. If everyone could see that you were afraid sometimes, then fear was normal. If everyone could see that you didn't know things, then admitting ignorance was normal. If everyone could see that you made mistakes, then making mistakes was a part of being human. In our modern world, we often hide our emotions. We're taught that certain emotions are inappropriate in certain contexts. We learn to maintain a professional demeanor at work. We learn to smile even when we're sad, to appear confident even when we're afraid. We learn to suppress emotional expression. We've become quite good at it. There are times when this is appropriate and necessary. Sometimes emotional regulation is important. Sometimes we need to manage our expression to function in complex social environments. Sometimes professionalism requires a degree of emotional neutrality. But I wonder if we've lost something in the process. I wonder if constantly suppressing emotional expression creates a kind of internal fracturing, a distance between our inner experience and our outer presentation, a sense of not being fully known or fully knowing ourselves, a kind of chronic inauthenticity that accumulates and creates stress. When our outside doesn't match our inside, our nervous system registers this as a threat. Our body stays in a state of tension. What if we allowed more emotional honesty? Not in every context. Certainly there are appropriate times and places for emotional regulation. A physician needs to maintain composure in an emergency. A teacher needs to remain calm even if they're frustrated. But in our intimate relationships with our closest friends, in moments of genuine vulnerability, what if we let ourselves be seen? What if we showed our fear and our sadness and our joy more fully? What if we stopped performing versions of ourselves and showed up as we actually are? The effect would be profound. People who are around someone being genuinely emotional often feel permission to be genuine themselves. Authenticity creates space for authenticity. Vulnerability invites vulnerability. When you show your fear, it becomes safer for others to show theirs. When you admit you don't know something, it becomes normal for others to admit ignorance. When you let yourself cry, it becomes acceptable for others to cry. This is how real community is built. Not on pretense, but on authenticity. Not on performing competence, but on admitting difficulty. Not on isolation, but on genuine connection. Our ancestors lived in small groups where this kind of emotional honesty was necessary, where you couldn't hide your emotional state for long, where community was built on knowing each other deeply, including the difficult parts. Third, there's the gift of nonverbal understanding. Language gives us the ability to be very precise about certain kinds of things. We can describe the exact specifications of a tool or the details of a plan. We can be very specific and precise. We can convey information with clarity and efficiency. But there are things that resist linguistic description: the feeling of a particular moment, the quality of a relationship, the rightness or wrongness of a situation beyond rational justification, the intuitive sense that something is trustworthy or dangerous, the sense that someone is in pain even though they're saying they're fine, the understanding that a person is lying even though you can't point to specific evidence. Our ancestors had to develop a very sophisticated capacity to understand these things through nonverbal means. They had to trust their gut. They had to read people and situations carefully. They had to develop what we might call intuition. They had to notice subtle patterns and make sense of them without being able to articulate exactly what they were noticing. In our modern world, we often dismiss these nonverbal understandings as mere intuition, mere feeling, somehow less valid than rational thought. We value the things we can articulate in words. We're skeptical of hunches. We want evidence. We want logic. We want things we can explain to others. We distrust what we can't put into words. But research in neuroscience is revealing that our nonverbal processing of information is actually extraordinarily sophisticated. Our brains process vast amounts of information below the level of conscious awareness. We notice subtle patterns. We read faces and bodies with remarkable accuracy. Even if we can't articulate exactly what we're noticing, we take in thousands of microsignals and synthesize them into an overall sense of a person or situation. This is not magical or mystical. It's neuroscience. It's how the brain works. A skilled negotiator, for instance, reads the other party not just from their words, but from their nonverbal communication. A slight tightening around the eyes might indicate that the person has hit their limit on something. A shift in posture might indicate that they're becoming defensive. A change in breathing pattern might indicate stress or dishonesty. A person who glances away while speaking might be uncertain about what they're saying. A poker player reads other players through minute changes in facial expression or posture. They notice things that the other player isn't even aware they're expressing. These tiny changes in the mouth, the eyes, the shoulders, all of these reveal information. A therapist reads a client's emotional state from subtle cues: the pace of breathing, the tension in the jaw, the quality of eye contact, the way the person holds their hands, whether they're leaning forward or back, whether their shoulders are raised or relaxed. An experienced therapist can read a client so accurately that the client feels truly seen, and often the therapist hasn't said much. They've just been present and observant. These are sophisticated forms of understanding, and they're available to all of us if we slow down and pay attention. They're based on capacities we inherited from our ancestors. There are forms of intelligence that predate language. There are ways of knowing that are just as valid as rational thought, even if they're harder to articulate in words. And when we ignore them or dismiss them, we lose access to crucial information. Fourth, there's the gift of ritual and communion. Our ancestors used sound and movement together to create profound experiences of group unity. They would gather, probably around fire when fire became a regular part of their lives. They would chant together, move together, create experiences that bound them emotionally. These weren't just social activities or entertainment, they were profoundly meaningful. They created a sense of belonging and safety that was essential for psychological well-being. They created what anthropologists call a communitas, a sense of being part of something larger than oneself, a deep sense of connection and shared purpose. When people move together, chant together, dance together, beat drums together, something happens neurologically. The brain states synchronize, heart rates begin to align, breathing patterns become coordinated, nervous systems entrain to each other. People feel connected at a visceral level. The sense of being part of something larger than oneself becomes overwhelming. It's a powerful and important human experience. We need it. Our nervous systems need it. Consider what happens in a concert when thousands of people move together or sway together to music. Consider what happens in a protest march when people chant together and move together. Consider what happens in a religious service where people pray together or sing together. Consider what happens in a dance club where people dance together in synchrony. There's a quality of connection that emerges that can't be created in isolation. There's a sense of belonging, of being part of a community, of mattering. In our modern world, we've largely abandoned the rituals that create this kind of communion. We've replaced them with screen-based interactions, which are fundamentally different. There's no synchronization of nervous systems through a screen. There's no shared breath. There's no way for one person's energy to truly merge with another's. There's no embodied communion. You might feel connected to someone online, but it's a different kind of connection. It lacks the visceral, nervous system level synchronization that happens with physical presence. We still have rituals, of course. Religious ceremonies, celebrations, gatherings, concerts, sports events, weddings, funerals. But many people feel disconnected from these. They experience them as performances to watch rather than communal experiences to participate in. They go through the motions without feeling genuinely connected. And I wonder if part of that disconnection is because we're not fully engaging the older systems of communication. We're not fully present. We're not fully surrendered to the experience of being in a group, moving and sounding together. We're still in our individual minds, still separate, still protected. What would it mean to consciously create more experiences of true communion? To gather with others and move together, even if it's just walking or dancing or any form of synchronized movement. To use our voices together, singing, chanting, even just speaking in unison. To create spaces where non-verbal connection is valued and fostered. To step out of our individual isolation and into genuine connection with others. To allow our nervous systems to synchronize with the nervous systems of others. Fifth, and finally, there's the gift of mystery. The silent world is a world of vast mystery. So much remains unknown. Non-verbal communication is never completely certain. You can read someone's face and be wrong. You can sense something and be mistaken. You can feel that someone is trustworthy and later discover they weren't. You can feel certain that something is true and discover you were incorrect. This uncertainty creates a kind of humility, a recognition of how much you don't know about another person, a recognition that understanding is always partial, always incomplete. In our modern world, we often feel that language and information should clarify everything. We should be able to explain ourselves fully. We should be able to understand others completely if we just talk enough, if we just get enough information, if we just ask enough questions. We live in a world where information is increasingly available. We can look up almost anything. We can communicate across the globe instantly. We can share our thoughts and feelings in extraordinary detail. We feel that knowledge and understanding should be complete. But this is an illusion. There are always gaps. There are always mysteries. There's always more to another person than can be put into words. A person is not a problem to be solved. A person is not a puzzle where, if you just gather enough information, you'll understand them completely. A person is a consciousness as deep and vast as your own, as full of experiences and thoughts and feelings, as complex and contradictory and beautiful, as unique and particular and ultimately mysterious. I think there's something beautiful in accepting this. in sitting with another person and recognizing that they're fundamentally unknowable, even as you grow closer to them, even after decades together, even in the most intimate relationships. This kind of acceptance creates a different quality of relationship. It creates reverence. It creates the possibility of genuine surprise and discovery. No matter how long you've known someone, it creates spaciousness. It creates freedom. When you stop trying to fully understand someone and just appreciate them as they are, something shifts. You can love someone without needing to completely understand them. You can be in a relationship without needing to solve the other person. You can accept mystery as part of the fabric of connection. And this acceptance is liberating. It's liberating for you because you can stop the exhausting work of trying to figure someone out. It's liberating for the other person because they don't have to be fully knowable. They can be themselves, including the parts that don't make sense, including the parts that are contradictory or confusing. This is how our ancestors likely experienced relationships. They knew each other deeply, but they also accepted mystery. They didn't have language to dissect every aspect of relationship. They didn't have psychology to analyze each other. They just knew each other and accepted each other. They let relationships be what they were, without needing to fully understand every dynamic. I want to trace now a kind of continuity that runs through all of human history, from the silent world to the modern world. A thread of connection that remains visible if we know where to look. A thread that connects us to our ancestors across thousands of years and millions of years. In every human society we know of, throughout history, the face and the body have remained central to communication. Even after writing emerged, even after language became the primary form of symbolic expression and information transmission, the face remained powerful. Kings and emperors were seen by their subjects because the physical presence mattered. The legitimacy of a ruler was often tied to their physical presence. Leaders gave speeches in person because the sound of their voice, the expression on their face, the way they held their body, these communicated something that written words or even transmitted words could not. A text proclamation from a distant king might not inspire loyalty, but a king standing before you, looking you in the eye, speaking with conviction, that created connection and belief. Think about the history of portraiture. For thousands of years, humans have been creating images of faces. Why? Because the face matters. Because there's something about a face that we need to preserve and honor and understand. A portrait is not just a representation of someone's appearance. It's an attempt to capture something of who they were, their character, their essence, something that goes beyond mere physical description. The ancient Egyptians created portraits of themselves to be placed in tombs. These portraits weren't meant to be seen, they were sealed away, but they preserved the image of the person for eternity. The belief was that the image preserved something of the person's spirit or soul. The Romans created busts of emperors and important people. These were placed in public spaces and in homes. They preserved the appearance of the person and something of their presence. Throughout history, people have commissioned portraits, have paid artists to capture their likeness, have wanted to be remembered as they appeared at a particular moment in time. This is a deep human need, to be seen, to be known, to have one's face preserved and remembered. Or think about theater. For thousands of years, humans have gathered to watch other humans perform stories. The ancient Greeks had theater. The ancient Romans had theater. Medieval Europe had theater. Theater persists to this day, despite movies and television. Why? Because there's something about live performance, about the physical presence of actors, that matters. In the theater, language is present, the words of the play, but so is everything else. The actor's face, their movement, their tone of voice, the physical presence. And audiences respond not just to the words, but to the whole experience. We laugh at facial expressions. We cry at the posture of grief. We feel tension from the way an actor moves across the stage. We hold our breath when an actor is quiet and still. The face is still communicating. The body is still communicating. Some of the most powerful moments in theater are silent. A character standing alone on stage, the light highlighting their face. No words, just presence, just the play of emotion across the features. And audiences are moved to tears. This is the ancient language. This is what moved people long before there were scripts and stages. This is gesture and facial expression elevated to an art form: dance, music, visual art. All of these are places where we preserve and express the non-verbal dimensions of human communication. A dancer doesn't need words to tell a story. A musician doesn't need to explain what the music means. A visual artist creates meaning that transcends language. These are ways that humans have continued to honor and express the deeper layers of communication that predate language. They are ways that we keep the ancient systems alive. In our personal relationships, this continuity remains unbroken. When you fall in love, it's not primarily through language. It's through attraction, through how someone's presence affects you, through the feeling of safety in their arms, through the way their face lights up when they see you, through the quality of their attention, through the way they move through space. These communications happen at a pre-linguistic level. Language comes later, confirming and expressing what the body already knows. The words "I love you" are powerful, but they're confirming something that was already communicated through looks and touch and presence. Think about the first moment of attraction. What communicates across that distance? It's not words, it's appearance, it's movement, it's energy. It's the way a person carries themselves, the light in their eyes, the curve of their mouth. These things bypass language entirely. They speak directly to your nervous system. And your nervous system responds. Your heart rate changes, your breathing changes, your pupils dilate. All of this happens without a word being spoken, or when you're raising a child. As an infant, your child cannot understand your words, but they understand your tone, your facial expression, the quality of your touch. You're communicating through the ancient systems. And as the child learns language, these nonverbal systems don't disappear. They remain foundational. A child learns to read a parent's mood from their face before they learn the words to describe emotions. They understand love through being held before they understand the word love. They learn about safety and danger through observing the parent's emotional and physical response. A parent's expression of fear alerts the child to danger. A parent's smile reassures the child that all is well. Grief is another place where we see this continuity powerfully. When someone dies, words are largely inadequate. What we really need is to be held, to have another person sit with us in our pain, to have our grief acknowledged through presence rather than explanation. Mourning rituals across cultures involve physical acts, hugging, touching, sometimes moving the body in specific ways. These physical actions communicate something that words cannot. The weight of another body next to you, the feeling of being held, the knowledge that you're not alone. Sitting Shiva in Jewish tradition involves physical proximity, sitting together in a confined space. Keening in Irish tradition involves vocalizing grief through the body and voice. In many cultures, people gather around the bereaved and sit in silence. The silence is not uncomfortable, it's a presence, it's a holding. Keening, the wailing that happens in some cultures, is not explained or justified. It's felt, it's powerful, it's the body expressing what words cannot. And in moments of true danger or crisis, we revert to these older systems immediately. A parent who hears their child in danger doesn't think through language, doesn't form words. Their body moves, their face shows protective rage. They operate at a level of primal response that bypasses language entirely. In crisis situations, people often report that they don't remember what they said, but they remember vividly the emotions, the physical sensations, the looks on people's faces. Language is offline. The ancient systems are online. This suggests that despite all our technological advancement, despite all the ways that language and writing have transformed human civilization, we remain creatures of the silent world. We remain beings who communicate primarily through our physical presence, our emotional expression, our non-verbal understanding. Language is an overlay on this foundation. It's a powerful overlay that's allowed us to accomplish extraordinary things. We've built civilizations. We've created science. We've preserved knowledge across generations. We've created art and music and literature. Language has given us these things, but the foundation remains. The ancient systems remain. We are always, in some sense, still living in the world of our ancestors. We are still reading faces. We are still responding to presence. We are still moved by gesture and touch. We are still communicating at levels that words don't reach. And the most important moments of our lives, the moments of birth and death, of falling in love, of profound grief, of genuine joy, these are often marked by silence, by presence, by the ancient languages that predate words by millions of years. As we approach the conclusion of our journey, I want to reflect on what we've explored tonight. What does it mean that humans communicated for hundreds of thousands of years without language as we know it? What does it mean that we still carry those capacities within us? What does it suggest about who we are and how we should live? I think first it means that we should have great respect for our ancestors. They were not less intelligent than us. The brains of Homo erectus were smaller than ours, it's true, but they still represented a remarkable leap in cognitive capacity compared to earlier human ancestors. The brains of Neanderthals were actually larger than modern human brains on average, and ancient humans, modern Homo sapiens from tens of thousands of years ago, had brains identical to our own in size and structure. They were not inferior in their thinking or their feelings. They were different. They had different tools, different technologies, different forms of expression. But they were fully human. They loved. They created art that still moves us to tears. They mourned. They celebrated. They built communities that functioned. They experienced beauty and wonder and fear and joy. All of this happened in a world without written language, without the linguistic tools we now take for granted. They were just as capable of profound emotion and complex thought as we are. They were just as worthy of respect and remembrance. And perhaps that should inspire a kind of humility in us. We often feel that language and writing are signs of superiority. That progress means having more and more sophisticated tools for linguistic expression. That a more advanced civilization is one with more books, more writing, more recorded knowledge. But our ancestors accomplished remarkable things without these tools. They navigated vast distances. Genetic and archaeological evidence suggests that modern humans traveled to Australia over 60,000 years ago, across open water, without instruments or charts. They solved practical problems. They created art, cave paintings and carved figurines that display skill and meaning-making. They built social structures that functioned effectively for thousands of years. They survived and thrived in environments we could barely survive in today, even with all our technology and language and books. Second, I think recognizing the ancient systems of communication might help us revalue something we've been losing. In our rush toward more and more language, more and more information, more and more verbal exchange, we've been leaving behind these older, deeper forms of connection. We've been filling silences with noise. We've been replacing presence with distraction. We've been prioritizing words over the full range of human expression. We've been becoming more articulate at the same time we're becoming more isolated. What if we consciously reclaimed some of what we've lost? What if we became more aware of and more intentional about nonverbal communication? What if we practiced being more present, more emotionally honest, more attuned to the subtle signals that others are constantly sending? What if we valued silence and stillness as much as we value speech and activity? I think we'd find ourselves more connected, more understood, more able to truly understand others. We'd find that relationships deepened, that the quality of our emotional lives improved. We'd find that there's something profoundly healing about being truly seen and truly understood at a level that goes beyond words. We'd find that our nervous systems are calmer, that our stress decreases, that we feel less lonely, that we belong. Third, I think this history suggests something important about human nature. It suggests that our drive to communicate, to be understood, to connect with others is one of the deepest parts of who we are. It's not something that language gave us. It's something that predates language by millions of years. It's something that language allows us to express in new ways, but it's not the source of it. It's something more fundamental, something more ancient. We are social creatures at our core. We need to belong. We need to be seen and understood. We need to feel connection with others. These needs don't require language. They're satisfied by presence, by attention, by being truly met by another person. Language is a tool that helps meet these needs, but it's not the only tool, and sometimes I think it gets in the way. Sometimes words create distance. Sometimes words are used to avoid connection rather than create it. Sometimes a person talks to avoid intimacy. Sometimes words are a wall rather than a bridge. Fourth, this history reminds us that communication is not primarily about transmitting information. Yes, that's one function of communication. We use language to share facts, to coordinate action, to exchange information. But it's not the primary function. The primary function of communication is connection. It's about being present with others. It's about creating shared understanding. It's about belonging. It's about knowing and being known. A parent communicating with a young child is not transmitting information efficiently. If that were the goal, you'd write it down or use a video. You'd be precise and efficient. But parents don't do that. They sit with their children. They repeat things. They sing. They make faces. They talk about things the child already knows. Because the parent is not primarily transmitting information. The parent is creating connection. The parent is building a sense of security and belonging. Even now, in our information-saturated world, I think the primary function of communication remains connection. When we speak to each other, we're not primarily exchanging facts. We're checking in with each other. We're saying, "I'm here, and I want you to know that I see you and I care about you." The words are just the vehicle for that message. The real message is carried in the tone, in the eye contact, in the quality of presence. When those nonverbal elements are absent, the words feel empty. When those elements are present, even simple words can be profound. Finally, I think this history suggests that the future of human communication doesn't require us to abandon language. Language is too powerful, too useful, too much a part of who we are now. Language has given us science and art and literature and connection across distance. We don't want to lose that, but it does require us to remember that language is not the whole picture. It requires us to value and develop the older systems of communication. It requires us to bring more consciousness to how we communicate as embodied beings, not just as speakers and writers. It requires us to slow down, to be present, to notice the faces of the people we care about, to listen not just to words, but to tone and silence, to allow our bodies to speak, to allow others to be seen. We've traveled a long way together tonight. We've journeyed from the African savanna 1.9 million years ago to the caves of Europe 40,000 years in the past, to the emergence of writing 5,200 years ago, and back to now. We've explored how humans communicated before language existed in its modern form. We've seen how those ancient systems remain active within us. We've recognized the gifts that the silent world still offers. As you rest now, feeling the weight of your body settling into the bed or chair where you're lying, I want to leave you with a few thoughts to carry with you into sleep and into your waking life. The next time you're in a conversation with someone you care about, I invite you to notice the non-verbal communication happening. Notice the other person's face. Notice how it changes as they speak. Notice the light in their eyes. Does it brighten or dim as they talk? Notice the way their body moves. Are they leaning toward you or away? Are their shoulders relaxed or tense? Are they open or closed? Don't just listen to their words. Listen to the whole of them. Feel the presence of another human being. This is ancient communication. This is the language of the silent world that still lives within us. And when you find yourself struggling to express something important, something that matters deeply, remember that words are not your only option. You can sit with someone. You can look them in the eye and let them see what you're feeling without words to mask it. You can let your face express what your words cannot. You can let your body communicate what language fails to capture. You can sit in silence together and allow that silence to carry meaning. Often, the most important communications happen without words at all. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply be present with someone. Simply listen. Simply hold space. The human face is still a marvel. Your face, right now in this moment, is capable of expressions that can communicate the fullness of the human experience. The joy, the sorrow, the wonder, the fear, the love, the uncertainty, the yearning. All of it is written in your face if you allow it to be. Don't hide that. Don't suppress it. Don't perform a version of yourself that you think others want to see. Let yourself be seen. Let your genuine emotional experience be apparent in your face and body. This is how real connection happens. This is how we truly know each other. This is how we break through the loneliness that so many of us carry. And remember that you are the latest chapter in a story that stretches back millions of years. You carry within you the capacities of your ancestors. You can read a face and understand emotion. You can sense danger or safety in a room without being told. You can feel when someone is being truthful with you and when they're holding back. You can see through pretense. You can communicate depths of meaning with just a look. You can convey love and safety and acceptance with your presence alone. You can create deep connection in silence. These capacities are not primitive. They're not less than language. They're sophisticated and powerful, and part of your birthright as a human being. The world you live in is flooded with language and information. Your phone is probably within arm's reach, filled with words and images and demands for your attention. In tomorrow's waking hours, you'll be immersed in language, speaking, listening, reading, writing. At work, at home, in your car, on the train, language is everywhere. In some ways, it's wonderful. Language allows us to share ideas, to transmit knowledge, to connect across distances. Language allows us to preserve history and to imagine futures. Language has given us extraordinary gifts. But in other ways, all this language can be overwhelming. It can create noise. It can make it hard to hear what matters most. It can make it hard to be still. It can make it hard to just be present with another person without the pressure to say something. So, I want to encourage you. Find moments of silence. Find moments where you can be present with another person without filling the space with speech, without the pressure to say something profound or fix something or explain something. Look at faces. Really look. Let yourself feel what you feel. Let yourself show what you're showing. Let yourself be moved by the presence of another human being. These moments are where real life happens. These are the moments that create genuine belonging. These are the moments that connect you to your ancestors and to the long human journey. Our ancestors stood in circles around fires, the flickering light creating shadows on their faces. They looked at each other across the flames. They understood each other without words. They created culture, transmitted knowledge, built relationships, celebrated and mourned, all through the ancient systems of communication. They were fully human. They were fully capable of profound connection and meaning-making. They were capable of love and courage and creativity and beauty. And all of this happened in silence. And so are you. You carry their capacity within you. In this moment, as you lie in the darkness, know that you are connected across time to millions of ancestors who learned to be human together without language. You are part of a lineage of beings who perfected the art of silent communication. That lineage flows through you. That capacity is yours. It's alive in you right now. It's been alive in you your whole life. Every moment you've truly connected with another person. Every moment you've been understood without words. Every moment you've felt genuinely seen. That was this ancient capacity at work. As you drift towards sleep now, notice the quality of silence around you. Notice how much can be understood and felt and known in silence. Notice how the absence of words can sometimes feel like a gift rather than a void. Notice how much communication happens in the quiet. Notice how your heart can speak without your voice. Notice how you can be present with yourself in silence. Notice the breath moving in and out of your body. Notice the weight of your body on the bed. Notice the feeling of being held by the earth beneath you. And know that you are safe. You are known. You belong. Not because anyone told you so with words, but because you can feel it. You can sense it. You can read it in the air around you. You can know it in that ancient pre-linguistic way that your ancestors knew it for hundreds of thousands of years. Your nervous system knows it. Your body knows it. the deep parts of you that remember millions of years of human connection. Those parts know it. The journey we've taken tonight is one that you can return to whenever you wish. Whenever you need to remember that you are more than your words, that your value is not determined by what you can articulate, that you are known and loved at levels that language never reaches, that you belong to a human community that stretches back across time, that you are part of something vast and ancient and enduring. In the days and weeks ahead, as you move through your life, I invite you to carry forward the themes we've explored. Remember that there are forms of communication that don't require words. Remember that presence is a gift. Remember that emotional honesty creates connection. Remember that non-verbal understanding is a form of intelligence. Remember that ritual and communion are important for your well-being. Remember that mystery is part of the beauty of human relationship. And remember that you're not alone in this. Everyone around you carries these same ancient capacities. Everyone you meet has the ability to read faces, to sense emotion, to communicate without words. Everyone has the capacity for genuine presence and connection. Everyone carries millions of years of evolutionary wisdom about how to be in relationship with others. What if you approached each person you meet with the recognition that they carry this? What if you looked at people not just as speakers and doers, but as bearers of this ancient wisdom? What if you allowed yourself to be seen by them? What if you let them be seen by you? The implications are profound. The world might feel different. Relationships might deepen. The quality of your presence might improve. Your sense of belonging might strengthen. Your loneliness might ease. Your sense of being part of the human family might become more real, more visceral, more grounded in your body rather than just an intellectual understanding. I want to thank you for joining me on this journey. Thank you for traveling backward through time with me. Thank you for considering a world before language. Thank you for thinking about what we might have lost and what we might reclaim. Thank you for allowing these ideas to settle into you as you prepare for sleep. Thank you for your presence and your attention. Before you close your eyes completely, I'd love to invite you to engage with this story in a way that helps others discover it too. If this narrative resonated with you, if these ideas about ancient communication and silent connection touched something in you, if you felt moved or comforted or understood, please consider liking this video. Your engagement helps this story reach others who might find meaning and comfort in it. It helps people who are seeking rest and understanding. It helps people who are wondering about their place in the long human story. It helps people who are feeling isolated or disconnected or unseen. Your like is a small gesture that ripples outward. And please, if you haven't already, subscribe to Whispers of Time. We have many more journeys through history waiting for you. Stories of forgotten civilizations, lost ways of life, ancient wisdom, and the profound beauty of human experience across the ages. We have stories about the first humans to cross deserts and oceans, stories about societies that thrived in harmony with their environments for thousands of years before modern civilization disrupted them, stories about the ordinary people who built extraordinary things, stories about the depths of human resilience and creativity and love. We have stories designed to help you relax, to help you learn, to help you rest. Stories designed to deepen your sense of connection to the long human journey and to what it means to be alive. Stories that remind you that you are not the first to feel lonely or afraid or confused, that humans have faced challenges and overcome them, that humans have created beauty in the face of difficulty, that humans have loved and mourned and celebrated across thousands of years. You can find us at Whispers of Time on YouTube. Search for Whispers of Time and you'll find our channel. New stories will be waiting for you whenever you need them, whenever you need to rest, whenever you need to remember who you are and where you come from, whenever you need to feel connected to something larger than yourself, whenever you need to remember that you belong to the long human family. But for now, in this moment, your task is simply to rest. Let your eyes grow heavy. Let your body settle into comfort. Let the silence around you deepen. Let yourself drift into sleep, knowing that you carry within you millions of years of human connection. Let yourself rest in that knowledge. Let yourself be held by the knowledge that you are part of something vast and beautiful and enduring, that you are connected across time to countless others who have lived and loved and created meaning, Feel your breath moving in and out. Feel the rhythm of your heartbeat. These are the same rhythms that have moved through millions of human bodies across millions of years. These are the markers of being alive, of being human, of being part of the great chain of life that stretches from the deep past into an uncertain future. Feel the weight of your head on the pillow. Feel the way your body settles into the bed. Feel the support beneath you. This is the earth. This is the same earth that held your ancestors. This is the ground that held their feet. This is the world they knew and loved and fought to survive in. You are here now. You are alive now. You are conscious now. And in this moment, you are connected to all of them. To the hunter standing on the savannah 50,000 years ago. To the painter in the cave 30,000 years ago. To the farmer 10,000 years ago beginning to plant the first crops. To the storyteller 5,000 years ago reciting the epics by firelight. To the writer 2,000 years ago creating the first written words. To all the people throughout history who have sought to be seen and understood. To all the people who have loved and grieved and celebrated. To all the people who have tried to make meaning in the face of mortality. You are part of them. They are part of you. Your DNA carries their DNA. Your brain carries neural patterns shaped by millions of years of evolution. Your capacity for love and connection and communication, all of this comes from them. Sleep well, my friend. You are held in the embrace of history. You are part of the great human family that stretches from the ancient past into an unknown future. You are known and valued and deeply, truly connected. Not through words, but through the ancient silent language that binds all humans together across time. Good night. May your rest be deep and restorative. May you awaken refreshed, carrying with you the wisdom of your ancestors. May you move through the world tomorrow with greater awareness of the silent communication happening all around you. May you see the faces of those you encounter and recognize in them your own humanity. May you remember that you are never truly alone. May you feel in your bones and in your heart that you belong. May you know that within you lives the capacity to connect, to understand, to be understood. May you use that capacity with grace and intention. May you see others with the eyes of your ancestors, with patience, with presence, with genuine interest in who they are beneath their words. And may you be kind to yourself. May you recognize that you're doing the best you can, that you're learning, that you're growing, that you're becoming more human every day as you practice presence and connection and emotional honesty. May you forgive yourself for the times you weren't present, for the times you hid behind words, for the times you missed an opportunity to truly see another person. May you know that every moment is a new opportunity. Every conversation is a chance to practice these ancient arts. Every encounter with another human being is a chance to say, without words, I see you. You matter. You belong. Sleep now. Rest. Let your mind settle. Let your body relax. Let yourself drift away on the river of sleep, knowing that you are safe, knowing that you are held, knowing that you are part of something eternal and beautiful and true. Whispers of time, where history becomes a lullaby, where the past becomes a comfort, where you remember who you are and where you come from, where you find rest. Good night. Sleep well. We'll be here whenever you need us.